Okay, so we're now recording. So good morning and namaste, everyone. This is Atul. We're going to go through the remaining parts on the Ahara presentation that we started last week. We went through the vegetables, and we talked about the various types of vegetables, root vegetables, cruciferous vegetables, diuretics, and so forth. Now we're going to talk about grains and legumes. So let's start with grains. Now, according to Ayurveda, grains are generally sattvic, and they are generally vata and pitta balancing, and they can aggravate kapha in excess because grains are sweet. We'll talk a little bit more about some of the different effects of grains according to Prakriti. But grains are a very important part of our diet. You can basically live on grains. You can't It's very hard to live without grains. If you get grains in your diet, you get proteins, you get, it'll give you strength. If you have a diet without grains, that's considered a fasting or a reducing type of diet. For example, some people observe what is called a Ekadashi Vrat twice a month. And that means on the 11th day of each fortnight, one takes a fasting diet. And one way of fasting can be to only have water, it can be to only have milk, it can also be only to have fruits and vegetables. And there can also be a less aggressive fast, which is having fruits, vegetables, and nuts, but no grains or beans or corn or other or legumes. So grains have the earth element. They are earthy, and they will build and nourish dhatus. So again, getting back to the statement, grains give us strength. Grains make us strong. Even Henry David Thoreau, while he may not have been strictly vegetarian, he definitely liked the idea of a plant-based diet, and he made the observation that, oxen are very strong eating, eating grass and grains. Of course, they're equipped to digest grasses and digest cellulose, but grains give us strength. They build the dhatus and they nourish the dhatus. Now, there are two basic types of grains. There are the diuretics, which include barley, corn, rye, and buckwheat. And for a kapha person, and if a kapha person is trying to avoid the building effect of grains, because if you don't believe that you can get fat from eating grains, well, yes, you can, especially if there's stress involved. But the diuretic types of grains are less kapha increasing. This is an important distinction. So, for a kapha person who's trying to avoid the increase of kapha, these grains are going to be less kapha increasing. And then there are grains that give bulk and they provide stool support for Vishamagni. And these are the nourishing grains like rice, both basmati rice and brown rice. And there's also brown basmati rice, there's whole wheat, and there's oats. So these are all nourishing grains. They're building grains, and they will also be good for having regular bowel movements. Whole grains are always going to be better than anything that's bleached or polished or has had some of the fiber removed is not going to give us as much. It's not going to give us such good support for elimination. And as you know, one of the pillars of health in Ayurveda is to have regular elimination. One of the elements of health, according to Ayurveda, is to have good digestion, regular elimination, and to have balanced doshas. So if we don't have regular elimination, we're not getting ama out of the body. And many naturopaths, of course, if you talk to naturopaths, they really have a good amount of the right idea, because they talk about, make sure you drink enough water so that you're eliminating toxins, and make sure you get enough grains. I'm, I'm sorry, make sure you get enough fiber. So naturopaths will talk a lot about the importance of having fiber, and it's very true. Many people just don't have sufficient fiber in their diet. So fiber is very important, and that is something that we do get with whole grains. So vatas should avoid the yeast breads. It's better to have unleavened breads, like tortillas. You can get one thing that you can get is you can get ready-made tortillas and roti. The roti is going to be often made from durum wheat, whole grains, and the you can sometimes get ready-made flour tortillas that basically just need to be cooked, and they cook in about 30 seconds on a hot griddle. So that's actually a useful thing. And you can avoid having the yeast breads, because yeast is going to tend to be somewhat unbalancing for vata. It's somewhat less the case with with fermented breads, like with sourdough. Another option, of course, are dosa. And we have a cooking video on how to make your own dosa batter. And you can make dosa with mung dal and rice. It's better to use the idli rice, but you can use any kind of rice to make dosa. And it just requires a little bit of setup, but once you have prepared the batter, it's a naturally fermented batter, and it's very healthy, very balanced, and it'll be good for vata also. But for vata, avoid the yeast bread. Grains should not be deep fried, because this can produce ama, especially for kapha. Refrying grains is really something that's good to avoid. When grains are fried, they become more dry and they become harder to digest. And even though this may be very tasty, and there are even some things like kachoris, they're kind of a delicacy. They're a thing that one might have on the side. Kachoris, samosa, puris. It's a good thing to avoid too much of that. If you haven't had puris, they're a type of a fried flat bread. It's very popular in India because you can make it just about anywhere. All you need is hot oil, and you need to be able to take a dough and roll it out flat. Dried grains, things like corn flakes, crackers, rice cakes, rice flakes. These will tend to be kapha balancing, and they will tend to bring down vata somewhat. There are a couple of types. There's a couple of variants of rice. There is mumra, is something that you can get in an Indian store, and that is puffed rice. So yeah, it is a little bit like Rice Krispies, but a little bit more puffy, and you usually cook them. So basically, it's rice that has not been cooked while the rice has been freshly harvested, and before the rice has been dried, the rice gets puffed in heat. And then you can heat some oil, add some spices, a little bit of nuts, and you can, you can roast that. Black rice is very good. It's hard to get. It's all the black rices that I've seen have been wild rice, the North American wild rice. It's really great stuff. It's just bloody expensive, but it's very sweet. So it's going to be somewhat kapha increasing. Yeah, I mean the same thing is going to be true of the red rice. So for for vata and pitta persons, those are going to be good. Kapha persons might want to stick more with basic brown rice, and you can get a good brown basmati rice. One thing that is very important to mention, my belief over the years, my favorite rice is brown basmati rice. I am a pitta kapha. one thing that I initially did not like brown rice at all for a long time. I found it very hard to digest because most people do not cook it properly. I found that the best ratio for brown rice is 4-to-1, or even a little bit more. Meaning for every cup of brown rice, uncooked, I'm going to use 4 cups of water. I'll put that in a rice cooker. I'll wash it, put it in the rice cooker. I'll add the salt, 1 teaspoon of salt per cup of brown rice uncooked. And I'm going to add a little bit of oil or ghee. Soaking the grains is always preferred for rice and dal. I often have not planned ahead. Some things, for example, if you make dosa, you have to soak it. You have to soak it overnight, and you have to let it sit in the soak water until it begins to bubble up and ferment a little bit. And then you blend it up along with some of that water where it has fermented. So soaking grains is actually important, and I think we're gonna get to that. But if you cook, getting back to brown rice, if you cook brown rice with the right amount of water, the grains are going to be big and they're going to split, and they're very soft. If you have brown rice, if you ever go in a restaurant and they give you brown rice, it's often kind of chewy and it's like, that's not really, I believe that's not the right way. According to text, according to books like what is it? It's not Madhavanandan. It's the book from which we're actually going through this. A good way to make rice is what's called bhakta rice. So that bhakta rice is rice that has been boiled and the grains have split. They're really fully expanded, and that's the easiest to digest. So this is true. When you cook brown rice, you can cook brown rice in a rice cooker, and I love rice cookers. I'm sorry, I am a lazy cook, and I don't want to have to put more work into it than I have to. I love rice cookers, and that's my recipe for brown rice in a rice cooker. 4-to-1, and you set it on the whole grain rice setting. And it's not even a fancy, like a Zojirushi rice cooker. It's just a plain old Hamilton Beach rice cooker from Walmart, and it'll do a great job. So anyway, getting back to the puffed rice, and the other thing there's puffed rice, which is mamara, and I mentioned how that can be cooked, and there's also the rice flakes. And it is flat rice. What is that called in Indian shops? It's a very popular item. Basically, the way that you prepare, there's 2 types. Poha, yes. So poha is the flat rice, and there's thin poha and thick poha. And again, it's something that's prepared while the rice has not fully dried out. It's flattened out, and you get the dried flat rice. And the way that you prepare it, especially the easiest thing, is to prepare thick poha. And you wash the thick poha in cold water, and you just let it drain. You wash it once, and you let it drain. You heat up some oil. You have some cooked potatoes, you put it in, you heat the oil, you add your spices, you add your cooked potatoes, and then you add the poha, and that has been soaked. Just in the time that you've rinsed it in clean cold water and let it sit, it has already gotten soft. And then you have to add your salt and your powdered spices, and if you stir it too much, it's going to turn to mush. The thin poha is there are other ways to prepare it. We'll have to make a video on that sometime. So the dried things, these are going to be vata balancing, kapha balancing, and vata persons should have some milk with rice flakes or corn flakes or other dried things. Dried grains are convenient. They can be prepared ahead of time, and they can keep. So it's very convenient. And grains should be eaten with cooked or steamed vegetables. and don't mix grains with acidic fruits or raw food. So what are some of the dosha characteristics of grains? Whole wheat will be vata and pitta balancing, and it can be very kapha aggravating. So kapha persons may want to avoid whole wheat. Durum wheat, now durum wheat is used in roti flour. It's called roti or chapati flour. Durum wheat is a different type of wheat. It has less gluten and it is less kapha aggravating. But again, for a kapha person who's trying to avoid vitiation of kapha, you can basically avoid, you can reduce the wheat in your diet, and that will be helpful. Now, rye is pitta and kapha balancing. So having a rye bread, having a good rye bread that has a little bit of bitterness in it and a good amount of rye flour, it's not really possible to make a bread 100% with rye, because rye just does not have enough gluten really to hold it together. So it'll typically be some wheat flour mixed with rye. That's going to be better for a kapha person. It's going to be, have less of the kapha aggravating properties. Buckwheat, kapha decreasing, vata and pitta increasing somewhat. Corn, whole corn is going to be somewhat kapha balancing, but the amount should be less because it's sweet. So sweet things are going to be kapha aggravating. The sweetness of your typical American sweet corn is going to be somewhat kapha aggravating, but the corn itself for kapha is balancing. For vata and pitta, it can be somewhat aggravating in excess. Barley, pitta and kapha balancing, somewhat vata aggravating. Barley, there are many different ways to cook it. You can also put barley in a soup or a dal. It's a great way to prepare it. It's very easy. You can get a whole grain barley as well as the pearled barley. Millet, pitta balancing, vata and kapha increasing. You can also get millet flakes, because the millet can be prepared like rice, but it can just sometimes be a little painstaking to prepare it. Oats, vata and pitta balancing, kapha increasing. Quinoa, vata and pitta balancing, and kapha increasing. Rice is generally tridoshic, but if there's too much, it can increase kapha, and especially the brown basmati rice. It may not be the best choice for kapha persons. But rice is a very good choice, and it's a staple in many areas, in many parts of India. And rice, in fact, is such an important staple that there are many different varieties. For example, in West Bengal, and I believe this is also true in South India, there are at least 40 different varieties of rice. There's not just one rice. There are many different types of rices, and there are different things that are made with different rices. We've tried to keep our recipes fairly simple. We'll talk about basmati rice, we'll talk about brown basmati rice, and we'll talk about using idli rice. Idli rice is one of those varieties that comes from South India, and you have these small round grains. It's like the Japanese short-grained rice, and it is very good for making dosa and for idli. So, so these are some of the dosa the dosha characteristics, not the dosa characteristics. Dosha are kapha, pitta, vata. Dosa are the crepes that are made from rice and we make them with rice and yellow split mung dal instead of using urd dal, because urd dal is going to be very pitta, is going to be somewhat aggravating for many persons, for vata as well as for kapha. So that's it for grains. Let's talk about legumes. So some examples of legumes. You have mung beans, soy, black beans, kidney beans, etc. Legumes are going to have space, air, and a little bit of earth. In general, legumes are going to be pitta and kapha balancing and somewhat vata aggravating, but mung beans are tridoshic, so they're going to be okay for vata, pitta, and kapha. They are not going to cause any aggravation. You know, yellow split mung also, incidentally, it's one of the easiest legumes to cook. Um, you know, yellow split mung is fairly easy to get. Uh, Sometimes it's easier to find whole green mung because that's what people commonly use to make mung sprouts. They just take longer to cook. But yellow split mung cooks quickly. You can make a dal with yellow split mung in 20 or 25 minutes. That's without a pressure cooker, and they are very easy to digest. Legumes in general are somewhat astringent and drying, except for garbanzo and mung. They have protein, they have iron, they have B vitamins, they have trace minerals. You know, so regularly having a combination of rice and dal and in the diet, and some other grains such as wheat or buckwheat or rye, triticale. You know, there are also a lot of ancient grains that are now seeing a revival. So you can get other ancient grains other than the genetically engineered wheat, which has been genetically engineered to make it easier to harvest, sometimes genetically engineered to have built-in poisons for insects. Yes, you heard me right. Um, so yellow mung has somewhat different properties. It is easier to digest than green mung. They are both good. And whole grain mung also has a lot of fiber in it, and that's also a really good one. Frankly, when I've chosen yellow split mung over the whole green mung, it's usually been because I've been impatient and I've had less time available. But if you get whole green mung, soak it overnight, cook it. It takes a good 45 minutes to an hour for the whole green mung to cook properly. You can also get split green mung. And so, you can do either one. Yeah, that's well, that's basically what it boils down to. So legumes in general are good at retaining prana. So you can store legumes for 4 to 6 months in an airtight container in winter. You can have them all year round. They're really made to be a very essential food staple. I remember I became a vegetarian back in the mid 70s. I was still young, so my parents wanted me to talk to the family doctor, and he gave me the speech about well, if you don't have enough red meat, you're not going to have protein in your diet. I said, yeah, okay, thanks a lot for that. And then it was, of course, about 5 years after that that National Cancer Institute came out with their results about the relation between various cancers and consumption of animal proteins. Anyway, but the point is that legumes are a great source of protein. Most Americans, I would say, in my opinion, Americans are getting way more than their requirement of protein. It's very, very easy to get more than what you might consider the protein requirement. Just having legumes and having a balanced diet of rice, dal, some wheat or other grains, and vegetables, fresh vegetables and fruits. Very healthy. It gives you a lot of different things. And remember what we talk about in Ayurveda, and that is not really covered by many studies and numbers and statistics about what things you need, are how well you digest, how well you are assimilating what you eat. It's not just the dravya, it's not just the ingredients, but it's how you are processing it. Legumes need to be soaked and cooked well. So we asked about soaking. Yes, soaking legumes is important. And soaking grains is also something that can be done. People are also using sprouted wheat to make bread. Now, that's not really addressed so much by Ayurveda, but there's absolutely no harm in it, and they do have, it does increase their nutritional value somewhat. So, honestly, when I have made yellow split mung, it has often been in a big hurry, but I would always soak it if I had the chance. If you know you're going to cook it, and even if you can soak it for an hour or two, even 1 to 2 hours. Okay, even 1 to 2 hours is good. Depending on what you're cooking. Some things are absolutely essential. So for example, if I was cooking garbanzos, I would soak them overnight. I would cook them in a pressure cooker for an hour, and then I might put them in a slow cooker and let them stay in the slow cooker until it's time. We've also done something where, we would make a dal, cook something the night before, and have it in the slow cooker. We had enough for the next day. We kept it in the slow cooker and we kept it on warm. So it stayed hot and it basically cooked overnight. And then the next day it was very, very tender, and it was, it become somewhat transformed. That is the kind of thing that you can do with legumes. You can overcook legumes. You can let it just stay hot all night, and then it is still going to have it's going to give you pran. So let's see. So let's talk about legumes by dosa. By dosha. Oh, I'm getting confused. I'm saying a dosa instead of dosha. Um, So things that are pitta and kapha balancing and somewhat vata aggravating, adzuki, fava beans can be extremely aggravating for vata. They're very airy. The kinds of beans that have skins and that might have kind of a mealy consistency inside if you just cook them minimally, those are the ones that are going to tend to be more vata aggravating. Kidney beans, lima beans, navy beans, pinto beans, black beans, lentils, chickpeas or garbanzos. And there's two varieties of garbanzos. There's the white garbanzos that we get in Western countries and that are very popular in many Latino countries and areas. And there's a yellow garbanzo that is called that is used to make chola. And then there's also kala chana or black chana. And that's something that you only find in Indian stores. Now, the yellow chana is somewhat smaller than the white garbanzos. And the split version of that is called chana dal. When they're whole, you can cook them, and they're a little bit smaller, and I think they have a slightly less bland flavor than the white garbanzos. White garbanzos are great, though. I mean, they're fantastic, and you can cook them so many different ways. I've even made a dal out of whole white garbanzos, but I had to, and without a pressure cooker, I had to cook them for about 3 hours and then mash them up and then cook them some more. Soybeans also okay for vata in small amounts. Tridoshic legumes, basically it's mung beans, either green or yellow. Okay, they're excellent for diarrhea or constipation. They can also be used to make dosa and for tortillas. So mung beans are really fantastic, and they're easy to digest. Ayurvedic texts also recommend that if someone is sick and they're on a recovery diet, you can make a soup with vegetables and some yellow split mung, and have them drink the broth. When someone has been really, really sick and they just can't keep anything down and they can't digest anything, you can make a soup with vegetables and some yellow split mung and have that sick person drink the broth, and that will, that's the vegetarian version of chicken soup. That will give somebody some strength. They'll get strength just from the broth of that. So let's talk about oils quickly. I think we're just about out of time. Let us talk about oils. So oils are, the most important ingredient in Ayurvedic snehan, or bathing. That we use oleation. Oils should be applied on the outside on a daily basis, ideally. Internally, we use these in food to increase absorption of foods and herbs, and it's used as an anupan. So when we cook, for example, turmeric has miraculous properties, wonderful properties, amazing properties. But the oil that we put it in, and a common technique that we use is we'll heat up some oil or ghee and we'll add some spices. We may add some whole spices, we may add some powdered spices. We have to be careful, of course, that they don't get burned. But the oil is going to help carry the properties of those spices and herbs that we use into the various tissues of the body. So, that's why using some oil in cooking is important. We never cook without oil. There are very few things that we're going to cook without oil unless they already have a significant amount of oil in them. For external use, we can use massage oils with different virya. For example, wintertime, kapha person, what am I going to use? I'm going to use mustard oil. I'm going to use maybe sesame oil. These are both warming. They have warming potency. What about summertime? Well, I'm going to use something like coconut oil. Coconut oil is going to be very cooling. And there are also different herbal preparations, like Mahanarayan tail. So Mahanarayan is a very good oil. It's usually made with a sesame base, and it has various herbs added. It has a very nice fragrance. Sometimes when people are just getting used to Ayurveda, they find, especially if people are used to kind of massage as kind of a spa thing where they put the lotion on. I'm sorry, I hate that stuff, but they say, oh, I don't like the smell of that, especially if you use a pungent oil like mustard oil. Mustard oil has a strong smell, but it's very warming. A good thing to do in the winter if you're having problems with circulation, kapha person, is get a massage sitting out in the sun when it's a day that's not too cold, and get some sun with after having a massage with mustard oil, and then you take a good bath with soap and water afterward, and that really is wonderful. Ghee. So what are some of the qualities of ghee? So ghee is sweet in taste, it's cooling in energy, it's rejuvenating, it's good for the eyes and vision. It kindles digestion, it gives luster and beauty, enhances memory and stamina, increases the intellect, it promotes longevity, it is an aphrodisiac, and it helps to protect the body from various diseases. This is a quote from Bhava Prakash. We give ghee is very important in Ayurveda. People sometimes think, oh my God, it's butter oil, it's going to make me so fat. No, ghee used in the right amount, and you can get ghee that is produced from entirely grass-fed cows. Free range grass-fed cow ghee you can get. You can get ghee that's made from cultured butter. Ghee is naturally sattvic. Even if you have a couple of teaspoons of ghee in your diet every day, it is going to help produce ojas. It's going to help with your vitality. What are the reasons why we get various diseases? It's because we do not have the vitality, we don't have the strength in our immune system. So ghee is going to help. It's used internally with food and herbs. It's used as an ingredient in various herbal remedies and Ayurvedic jams. For example, there is a Chyavanprash is popular, and there are other jams and preparations. These are made with ghee. These have some ghee in them. Ghee is an anupan. It's a binding agent. It's a vehicle to help the herbs get to every cell, and it helps to get them into the bloodstream faster. It can also be used externally for massage because, oils can also be ingested via the skin. Ghee can be used as a busti, so you can take oil, ghee, or water mixed with herbs for Vishamagni. It'll hydrate the rectum and colon, and it helps to scrape ama from the colon and soften very hard stools. There are many other uses, including eye treatments, and it is a very effective wound healer. So ghee will be very much vata pacifying, and it'll be pitta pacifying, somewhat kapha aggravating. Kapha persons may avoid having a lot of ghee. What are the gunas? It's heavy, slow, dense, liquid, and soft. It increases rasa, increases ojas. So remember, I was talking about ojas. Ojas is basically the essence of shukra dhatu. This is the thing that gives us vitality. So, when you run across someone, let's say you run across a person who's old, but they never get sick, they're still active. That's a person who has good ojas. Ojas will give us a very long life and freedom from disease. Think of ojas like the ojas that you have in your body is sort of like air in a tire. If a tire is well inflated, it's hard to make a dent in it. It's hard to, the tire is very solid. And when we have a good amount of ojas in our constitution, then there's no room for disease to get in to slow us down. If ojas is low, then we are susceptible to all kinds of diseases. Ghee is nourishing and tonifying for all of the dhatus. Ghee increases shukra dhatu. It increases fertility, and it can also restore libido. Some contraindications: if there's high ama, high kapha, high cholesterol, then avoid or reduce ghee. And I think we're just going to wrap up here. So, you basically want to find unprocessed oils as much as possible. You want to avoid chemically extracted oils, and especially if they're produced with hexane extraction. Those are not considered a healthy option. Some rice bran oils are popular, but they use chemical extraction or they use a process with sulfuric acid. You want to avoid those. You want to also consider how you're going to cook them. Some oils have higher tolerance for heat: avocado, sunflower, corn oil, and those can be used for higher heat cooking. Cold pressed oils like olive oil, extra virgin olive oil, you don't want to use too high a heat. It will destroy the beneficial properties. So, for example, I like to use extra virgin olive oil. Extra virgin olive oil is fairly kapha friendly, and it's also good for pitta. It has a very slight amount of bitterness, but it does not like to be cooked really hot. But, put some olive oil, heat it up mildly, just enough to get your cumin seeds popping, and, you saute your vegetables. That works really well. Cold pressed coconut oil is very much pitta balancing, vata neutral, a little bit kapha aggravating because it's slightly cooling. Sunflower oil, kapha and pitta balancing, somewhat vata aggravating because it is slightly cooling. Extra virgin olive oil is neutral and it's slightly cooling. Again, one of my favorites. So I think we've run out of time there. We're going to end here. I thank you very much. Please post your, any questions on the forums, and thank you very much. So we're going to end there, and